Did you know that Shrek, produced by DreamWorks, was the first movie to ever win the Oscar award for Best Animated Feature? Today, we all know DreamWorks as a very solid competitor in the world of animation movies, with franchises like Kung Fu Panda and How to Train Your Dragon. But back then, they were still a fairly new competitor with only very little successful movies to their name. And they were of course going up against the animation giant Disney, who were just celebrating a huge success after their Renaissance era, featuring movies like Pocahontas, The Little Mermaid, The Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Tarzan. All very good movies, very serious, and almost always about a romantic relationship between a man and a princess, or at least a very civil woman. And all these movies were still produced in 2D animation, which was kind of Disney's bread and butter back then. So in 2001, DreamWorks decided to flip that whole classic script on its head and gave us Shrek. It was a revolutionary movie by not obeying to the classic Disney princess script, adding a lot of adult humor, featuring very popular music, and pushing the boundaries of 3D animation. Studios like Pixar and DreamWorks were the main driving force, which even led to the creation of the Oscar category Best Animated Feature, and Shrek was then the first movie to ever win that award. So because this movie was so revolutionary in 2001, I thought it would be interesting to see how it holds up in 2025. That's 24 years later. And I want to answer that question in two parts, because in some areas this movie is still shockingly up to date, but in other areas it does show its age. But let's start with the positives first and explore how this old but revolutionary movie manages to still feel very modern today. As I mentioned, what people knew back then were mostly very serious animated movies. I mean, think of movies like The Lion King, The Beauty and the Beast, and Pocahontas. All very good movies, but were they funny? Not really. Maybe some jokes here and there, but humor definitely wasn't a main driving force in those movies. Shrek, however, was the first movie of its kind to not take itself so seriously all the time. It made a lot of jokes, used popular music, made fun of classic Disney tropes, utilized fun different animation styles from time to time, and it doesn't feel like it was specifically made for kids. And in case these characteristics don't feel that special or unique to you, that's because nowadays, they're all over the place.
Human sacrifice. Kidding! So serious!
Like, sure, we still get movies like Let It Go featuring a princess or two princesses, but while it features a princess, it doesn't follow the old classic script, because in that case, a man doesn't end up saving the princess, it ends up being more about the love between sisters. And the princess herself isn't helpless, she's actually really powerful. And besides that, we now also have a lot of humor-driven stories like Cars, Kung Fu Panda, Vaiana, The Big Hero, Zootopia, and Inside Out. And remember, this isn't a critique about modern movies, I'm just describing a trend here. And in case you ever wondered where that trend started, Shrek is the answer.
Ooh, Shrek, did you do that? Man, you gotta warn somebody before you just crack one off. My mouth was open and everything.
The success of Shrek encouraged other studios to incorporate more adult-oriented humor and pop culture references into their animated films. The movie distinguished itself with its satirical approach to classic fairy tales. It actively poked fun at established tropes, which was a fresh and appealing concept back then. Basically, what Shrek did to the classic Disney princess story is what Deadpool is doing to the MCU right now.
True love's first kiss. Like that's ever gonna happen.
Besides, nobody's getting hurt.
So since this movie basically started that trend, what felt revolutionary back then still feels very up to date now, which is very impressive and something I think this movie doesn't get enough credit for. And now that I've praised this movie so much, as I mentioned before, there are also areas where its age definitely shows. So let's take a look at those. From today's perspective, this movie pokes fun at that classic Disney princess trope, which just isn't relevant today anymore. And this isn't really a critique, I'm just pointing out what was different when I watched this movie today, because the movie can't really do anything about that. That's just something what happens to a satirical approach after a couple of years, and it's probably also what will happen to Deadpool in a couple of years. The satire only works if what it makes fun of is common in other movies. If this movie was released like this today, everybody would probably be wondering why it's so obsessed with making fun of Disney princesses. Like, what did Disney princesses do to you, Shrek? But of course, when Disney princesses is all you know, then it's very funny. Another thing is that while this movie makes fun of all these classic Disney tropes, in the end it's all about a princess and a man saving her and all that true love BS.
Find true love's first kiss, then take love's true form.
In this movie, Fiona believes that the man that saves her is her true love, and Fiona and Shrek tell each other that they are in love after only spending 2 days together. I mean, did you even meet his family yet? What if he wants to have kids and you don't? Do you even know his last name? But seriously, this whole deal about true love and the core of the movie always having to be a romantic relationship is something that we left in the past, and I personally am very grateful for that.
Romantic moment?
Yeah. Sorry, lady. There's no time.
Of course, I don't mind a romantic relationship, but I do appreciate movies nowadays like Kung Fu Panda, Inside Out, or Vaiana that focus on things like friendship, loving yourself, loving your people, or the love between parents and their kids. So yeah, those are the 2 aspects that really didn't hold up so well in this movie. The first one, as I mentioned, is just the price of a satirical approach, so not really a critique. The second one is just something that I'm very glad changed in the last 24 years. But now I want to bring it back to something positive, and as always, look at my 3 favorite scenes in this movie. And my first favorite scene is actually the first scene in this movie.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
I love this scene so much because it just perfectly sets the stage for what this entire movie is going to be about. It sets up that it's not going to be a classic Disney princess story, and it sets up the humor part and that it doesn't take itself so seriously. My second favorite scene is Fiona doing this Matrix kick. This scene perfectly encapsulates a couple of things that I mentioned earlier, like that this movie is all about subverting expectations because she can fight. They're playing around with different animation styles, which is fun to watch, and we got those pop culture references. My third favorite scene is the dragon falling in love with the donkey.
You're a girl dragon, cause you're just reeking of feminine beauty.
It's another perfect example of a movie that just doesn't take itself so seriously. Like this killer dragon that we all expect, of course, turns out to be a girl that is really horny and wants to date this donkey. And now let's take a look at some of the things I noticed about this movie specifically from an adult's perspective. Because of course I watched this movie back then as a kid, and now watching it as an adult, some things change. One thing that's of course unique about this movie is that it focuses on adult humor a lot more than other animation movies of that time. So scenes like these are definitely something that stood out to me as an adult a lot more, and as a kid, I'm sure I laughed, but I'm not sure if I really got them. Probably not. From a more serious perspective in terms of adult themes, this movie did feature one very nice theme in form of an onion.
Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers.
It's all about exploring how people have layers and that you shouldn't or really can't judge someone from your first impression. You never know how this terrifying ogre truly feels or if this elegant princess isn't also a kung fu master. It's just a very nice and healthy theme to have in an animated movie that is of course also made for kids. But while kids will hopefully understand this theme, as an adult it does hit a lot harder, at least for me, because now you've really gone through this whole experience of judging someone yourself and turning out to be completely wrong and being judged yourself. And also as an adult, you have to deal with a lot more people in your daily life. So you're constantly judging people based on your first impression. But then it's really important to just be aware that you just judge them and not be completely determined on that judgment having to be correct and giving them a chance to change your perspective on them.
You're not exactly what I expected.
Well, maybe you shouldn't judge people before you get to know them.
I just love themes like this, but it's especially important for a movie like Shrek with its satirical approach to focus on something serious itself, because otherwise I think the movie just loses its emotion and weight. Because I'll accept that a movie makes fun of other movies, but it does have to bring something serious and something of value itself. So, well done, Shrek. Another thing that I already touched on, but is also different from an adult's perspective, is the whole true love and falling in love after 2 days BS. As I mentioned before, one part of why that feels weird today is because it thankfully isn't a trend anymore. But it's also something that as an adult just pops out to you a lot more, and that as a kid you maybe just accept and don't really pay attention to. But overall, I definitely still enjoyed watching this movie today, and I was surprised myself while researching for this video how impactful and trend-setting this movie actually was back then. While its satirical approach definitely doesn't make this movie as timeless as, let's say, something like Brother Bear or WALL-E, I definitely wouldn't say that this movie is outdated. So, that about wraps up my experience on watching Shrek in 2025. Have you revisited this movie lately? If so, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.